So did everyone get up well? Did you start the week off right? Bitcoin at 92,400 US dollars? Who's responsible for that? Him? Her? I think we have a lot to talk about. Bitcoin at 92,400 US dollars, yes. We're seeing a small dump at the start of the week, or actually you could even say it's a bit of a bigger dump here at this point. It's still not really dramatic because we're still in our rising wedge, or rather in our bear flag. The B, or rather wave B, was respected very, very well. The upper edge of our bear flag was also respected very, very well. The markets are moving significantly downward. The US markets are closed today, by the way, so we'll probably only see the real move tomorrow. But still, DAX is reacting, silver is reacting, gold is reacting, and we're going to take a look at all of that now. But before we get started, as always, feel free to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course, check out the free Telegram talk and Signal group. If you're interested in updates, news, and signals, feel free to join. You'll find the link for that for free down in the video description. And if you're still looking for an exchange where you can trade all of this, feel free to sign up with my partner, Exchange BingX. At the moment, there's a little New Year's event where basically with a certain trading volume, you can keep opening boxes. In those, you can get trial funds, bonus vouchers, and other rewards. So just sign up and get started. And now we're also getting started with the Bitcoin chart. As I said, Bitcoin is at $92,500. It's looking good. And if you were there for the live stream yesterday, you might remember what I said. Namely, let's start briefly with the weekly time frame. I know it's a bit unusual because we usually start with the smaller time frames, but today we'll start with the weekly. And yesterday I drew this blue line here. This blue line would have been important to me personally, simply to close above these highs here and finally get a higher weekly high, but we didn't get that. On the contrary, we fell back below it. We even dropped down to the level of the second weekly candle here, and we couldn't even manage to overcome the very first one here. That's not a good sign. We closed below it, which just means liquidity was swapped again, just like it happens during the altcoin weeks, just like it always happens during the Bitcoin weeks. Always swapping the liquidity at the top, giving everyone hope, and then immediately turning back down. Unfortunately, that's how things currently look for Bitcoin, which is why we're still stuck in our bear flag, or rather in our rising wedge at the moment. We're facing massive selling pressure. Several hundred million were liquidated from the market again in the last few hours, but the funding rates also rose significantly again yesterday. And what's the reason for that? On the one hand, this point, Macron will return the use of the EU Trading Institute. They are aiming for instruments as calls for retaliation increase. This basically means that the EU is also allowed to impose tariffs or place restrictions on the US market. That's point number one. What has the EU not done so far? They haven't imposed tariffs because they were a bit afraid since they were in negotiations at the time. Macron had already initiated this back then, but it was taken off the table again. Now, with the whole issue concerning Greenland, the situation looks different again, because now it's about, let's say, an entire country, and the EU doesn't just want to look like a little child and say, yeah, okay, thank you, we'll do it. Unfortunately, that's not how the game works, and these measures could include tariffs, new taxes on technology companies, or targeted restrictions on investments in the EU. That's one point. But at the moment, only the DAX is reacting to it. So what's point number two, which I want to tell you about now? I know you can't stand it anymore, hearing about it, but Japan says agreement with USOK's intervention for rapid moves. It seems like the time has come to slowly but surely unwind the carry trade. The fact that this news is coming out on a Sunday, or rather on a Monday, is okay, but Japan's finance minister said an agreement with the US justifies intervention to cope with sudden currency moves, stepping up her verbal warning to address the yen's weakness. What am I getting at? I'm bringing this up a bit earlier now because, of course, it will also have an impact on Bitcoin, so listen up. The 10-year government bonds, they're at 2.271. They peaked at 2.28 last night. Last week, we had a peak of 2.22. That's unbearable. Japan, the 20-year bonds are at 3.263 and the 30-year bonds at 3.61. US government bonds still look normal, but even they look like absolute bullshit right now. But Japan's government bonds look terrible. At the same time, the yen is now reacting for the first time to this intervention news. I told you on Friday, there's an interest rate decision in the US and also one in Japan, which is still coming up for us. So there's a lot coming up this week, especially in the Japanese region. The American side is pretty much cleared out, but that could have extreme effects and could stir things up even more. Because if we take a quick look at the heat map, it's like a ghost town. There's nothing, really absolutely nothing going on at the moment. Of course, as I said, there's a holiday in the US, which means there's significantly less liquidity available in the markets. But still, it's very, very strange that the heat map is really showing nothing at all, absolutely zero. In the past few days, you could almost say, except for the usual stuff. So trade cautiously. Bitcoin is, theoretically speaking, everything is still within the normal range. Why? Why? I told you yesterday in the live stream we had our pump here, and now we've simply retraced it. All well and good. We're still in the rising wedge, still in the bear flag. Everything is still within the normal range. We've liquidated a lot in the last few hours. We've simply undone the entire pump from last week. But as I said, what I don't really like about this situation is that we weren't able to break through this move sustainably on the weekly chart, or rather we couldn't form a higher high. And now with the Asia range, we're going to mark out the new range here. So be cautious at the start of the week, especially when it comes to Bitcoin. And we'll also talk about altcoins in a moment. Gold and silver are continuing to pump for now, but right now I'm happy with my short again. I'll think very, very carefully about going long. Actually, the plan was to go long somewhere in this area during yesterday's live stream, but due to the uncertainties now with Japan and the EU and the trade deals, I think I'll postpone the decision a bit longer. Let's move on to Ethereum. Ethereum did exactly what we talked about yesterday. 3193. That's where the alert was set. Honestly, I didn't expect it to happen this quickly either, but well, that's another topic. Now we just have to wait and see. So, as I also said in the live stream yesterday, Bitmain now has a partnership with MrBeast. We shouldn't underestimate that. Anyone who's a bit involved in the YouTube game knows he's basically the biggest YouTuber in the world now, with all sorts of crazy stunts, you name it. That could be the case. This could also give the 4 a new boost, but we have to see how the markets react today. Unless something really bad comes out of it, or it suddenly gains massively in value by a significant percentage, then maybe you could even consider a small long position here. The targets remain the same, 3,800 to about 4,100 US dollars for Ethereum. Also, with this whole story involving MrBeast, then Solana just completely took off. Congratulations to everyone who took the short here, really, from our entry up here. I didn't, but I'll still say it, from our entry. At its peak, 10%, and it's still 8%. Take money. Take 50% out there and you're good. Congratulations to everyone who took this trade. Otherwise, USD JPY, the strong yen or the strengthening yen, is making itself felt. We're back in our entry zone. The euro, on the other hand, is running. It's pumping, of course, because the safe haven is in demand again. The US dollar remains at a stable level, but it's also moving like our fractal at the moment. Gold is pumping. That's what I said yesterday, because yesterday the question came up in the live stream. Yeah, when is gold finally going to correct? Gold will keep rising as long as the uncertainties haven't been swept out of the market, or rather, until this uncertainty reaches a level of escalation where it's like, okay, now everything's crashing. And by that, I also mean the traditional stock markets. Then gold will also start to decline again because we simply, how do you put it best? Because people will then switch back to the dollar. And in the end, it's always the same game. Gold is currently still on a very, very high horse. Silver continues to look strong. Here again, we're experiencing a period of global uncertainty. You can choose USA, Venezuela, USA, Iran, and who knows what else. The USA and Greenland, the uncertainties, the global ones, not only economic but also geopolitical, are simply far, far too great. That's simply the reason why all the precious metals are pumping so hard right now. Let's move on to the traditional markets. DAX, DAX is getting its, like I said just last week, my short entry was up here. It's getting a small pullback, and above all, I just took a look at the futures. I think it was down here at 25,000 points, so the thing is currently moving nicely in the right direction. The tariffs will start to have an effect once they're actually set. Right now, they're not finalized yet, but the EU is planning to make something official. But you all know Trump's tariff playbook, Friday tariffs. Stir up panic over the weekend, even more on Monday, then let the markets correct and eventually get a trade agreement. It will be interesting to see, definitely. Otherwise, yes, the US markets are closed for now. Today, because of Martin Luther King Day, but still, there's quite a gap down, at least in the futures. So the S&P 500 short is going great. We've formed a new low, which is very, very good. And the Russell is also easing off a bit. And honestly, right, last but not least, I wanted to quickly show you Monero. For everyone who caught the short yesterday from the live stream, I think we had the chart here. Yes, exactly. Let's switch to the 1 hour time frame. That one also worked out perfectly, really perfectly at first. Here was the entry where I told you, picked up at around $615 and then down exactly into the target zone of 535. That's where the momentum came from. So for now, the sell-off could be over here. So it made another move. Congratulations to anyone who caught that. That was another 12%. Otherwise, please be careful. Also, I have to chuckle a bit because yesterday on Twitter, everyone was saying it's going to dump on Monday, nothing will happen, everything is fine. Yeah, maybe the real trouble is just starting now with Japan, but all right, we'll see. I'm curious. In any case, here we still have a nice red vector. I think sooner or later that one will be taken back. It's going to be an interesting week. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, join the Telegram group, and then we'll talk again later today. Until then, bye, and as always, stay creepy.